Thank you, everybody, for coming today. I really appreciate it. And as he said, I served in the Navy for 22 years, and I retired from the Navy in 1997. And before we go on, I'd like to introduce one special person in the room here today, and that's my son, who's sitting right there, named Mitchell Woody. Mitchell has been in the Marines for 17 years. He's a gunnery sergeant, which is the same rank I was as a chief in the Navy, and I'm very proud of him. And today's his birthday. And he drove up from North Carolina with his girlfriend, Diana. I'm glad to meet her for the first time. I want to start this out by saying that my experience is not unique, and I am nobody special in that regard. I want everybody to understand that this experience is your birthright, and we are all a part of this same powerful, unconditionally loving God that I had direct divine experience of. And I'm going to get into the story about how that happened, but first I'll tell you a little bit about my background. I grew up in East Texas, and I was raised in the Southern Baptist tradition of fundamentalist belief system. And I have changed that belief system because of my experience and everything that I've learned for the last 32 years that I've been seeking very, very deeply to try and understand exactly what happened to me that day. Anyway, I joined the Navy at 18 years old, and at 18 years old, you can turn the light down just a little bit, if somebody could control that a little bit for me so you can see the picture a little better. I got sent to a squadron with airplanes like this called a P-3 Orion, right out of boot camp in A school. And at 18 years old, I expressed an interest to see what it was like to fly in one day, and the commanding officer took me out of the work center I was in, said, "Come with me and I'll show you." And I thought they were going to have me just sit behind the pilot. I watched them start engines and all that. There's a place to sit behind the pilot on a flat panel. And I figured they're going to make me go strap in a seat before takeoff. Well, that's not what the skipper did. We got to the approach into the runway, and he turns to the engineer in the seat that was already sitting there doing his job. He said, "What do you think? Should we put him in there?" And I didn't know what they were talking about. And he goes, "Sure," and he unbuckles, and they tell me to get in the seat. And I'd just been in the squadron for like a week, literally. And I was literally in the snack bar thing for the squadron that they had used it for the profits, go to the rec fund for the command. I was selling hot dogs. 2 hours later, they've got me in the seat and I'm shoving power levers on a $40 million airplane. Where else can you do that? And the skipper, after the takeoff, and the engineer standing up behind me, you know, doing all the stuff he's supposed to do, and I'm like, big wide eyes, I don't know what's going on, but I'm having a ball. And then the skipper turns to me after they start the downwind leg and says, "By the way, son, you know you can do that job?" They knew what they were doing. They saw a young kid who had an interest. They set the hook, reeled me in, and that was it. I never looked back, and worked real hard at it. And before my 22nd birthday, I had earned my Navy wings, and I was qualified flight engineer at 21 years old. And that's where my career really took off. And so I started out in Jacksonville, Florida, and then I moved from there to Barbers Point, Hawaii. And yeah, I had some real tough duty. Somebody had to do it. And so while I was in Hawaii, we were doing a military exercise called RIMPAC, which they still do today. I can't remember what the letters mean. It's an acronym for something, something, something Pacific. And it's the biggest military exercise in the world, and it happens every year in the fall. No, in the spring, excuse me. And we had an airplane that had a history of making CHIPS lights, which is little flakes of metal or chunks with part numbers on it. You don't know which one. It's a little light that says CHIPS to tell you there's something wrong with the engine or the gearbox on the propeller. And you need to shut it down for precautionary shutdown and declare an emergency and land with 3 engines. So the thing is, we were going out for a 12-hour flight. So we had a maximum aircraft fuel load, maximum weight, everything. We were maxed out. And at 10,000 feet, CHIPS light came on. We shut down number 1 engine and declared an emergency. Had to dump fuel We can only dump a certain amount of fuel, so we can't get to our maximum allowable land weight. So we had to fly around for another 45 minutes to get down to our maximum allowable land weight. Now, because you're at your heaviest weight for landing, so you don't want to be any heavier than that because you risk doing structural damage and to the structural integrity of the aircraft if you hit too hard when you're really heavy like that. So because we're heavy, we have to fly faster to stay in the air or you're going to stall. So we're coming in a lot faster than normal. And because we've declared an emergency, there are fire trucks out there. But before I get into that story, I just want to run a few more pictures here for you so you can get a feel for what it was like from my view sitting in the flight station. This is my view from the flight station. You had the pilot seat on the left, co-pilot seat on the right, and my knees would be on either side of the pedestal right here. These are the power levers, and so I'd have one set of power levers, the pilot the other. All of this area was mine, all of this stuff was mine, emergency shutdown handles, and everything up there, front to back, left to right, was mine. We used to tease the pilots and tell them they were just glorified bus drivers with a degree because the plane was built around the engineer, and it was obvious with all the workload we had compared to theirs. We were teasing them, of course. And so that was my view from the flight station. This is what it looked like with night lighting on when you had to fly at night. That's a picture of one of the planes that used to fly by that bridge every day in Whidbey Island, Washington, when I was stationed in Washington right before I retired. And this is when you know you're having a bad day at the office. And you have two engines out on the same wing. And that means it's the starboard wing, the right wing. The airplane only has 3 generators, so you only have number 2 generator left. So now you're flying on 2 engines out, 1 generator, praying that one doesn't die on you, because then you have real problems, because then you don't have hydraulics or a lot of other things you need for flight control. But anyway, those are the kind of things of emergencies I was trained to deal with. I also flew in the spy plane version of the airplane. If you can get a feel for that, you can see all of the different antennas on it. The tail's different. There's a big bulge right under here that you can't really see, but I'll show you another picture of it from an angle. There's a canoe down there and one up here that's full of stuff that I could tell you about, but I'd have to kill you. You had to have a top secret security clearance to fly in those aircraft. And the normal P3s that tracked submarines, that was our primary mission for the regular P3, we'd take 2 flight engineers and 3 pilots, and there'd be 12 people on a crew. The EP3 had 3 pilots, 1 engineer, and 27 other people in the back. So it was crammed full of electronics. And there's only about 10 of those airplanes on the planet. And I don't know if you remember the spy plane incident where the Chinese fighter hit the US spy plane and they kept the crew and plane for 3 weeks, wouldn't give them back. That was my last squadron. I used to fly those missions in that airplane. I wasn't involved in that incident, but that's the kind of stuff I used to do. And I've been aggressively intercepted in that same fashion as well. That's another picture of the EP3. You can see a little bit bigger of the bulge. That's called Big Look radar. You can see a very long way. And that was our motto in the naval intelligence community. You know, in God we trust, all others we monitor. And I think after watching the news of the NSA lately, you can pretty much tell they're not kidding. And then that's what the engineers used to think of themselves back when I was in. You know, we all had big egos. Who are you? I'm an engineer. So we'll get back to the story, and I want to talk about what happened the day that we had the aircraft incident. This is the approach view of Barbers Point, Hawaii, when I had my aircraft incident that I just knew I was dead. And so we're coming in for the approach, and we're coming in way faster than normal. And because we've declared an emergency, we have fire trucks on the side of the runway that are kind of parked at a 45-degree angle, literally just off the side of the runway. They're probably sitting everything seemed normal on the approach. And the main mounts touched down, that was fine. Nose gear touched down, we immediately departed the runway at 135 knots, which is like 155 miles an hour, to the right. Thank God we landed on runway 4 left and not 4 right, or I would not be here talking to you today, because it was definitely not asphalt out there. It's rocks and all kinds of trees and stuff in the way. It would have been a very bad day. And keep in mind, we had 42,000 pounds of fuel still on board. So it would have been one gigantic fireball. It would have been over pretty quickly, I have to say, but it was a pretty scary moment. And so when we touched down and immediately departed the runway to the right, we're now leaving at an angle like that, at about a 45-degree angle in this area here, which you're not supposed to be on. And right as we departed the runway, the fire truck's sitting there on the right-hand side. And I could see the guy on the water cannon on top of the fire truck with the silver suit, and he's got the big square clear shield on his face, the face shield, you know, and our wingtip went over the top of the fire truck, okay? That's how close we came to this incident. And I saw this coming up at us, I'm like, I knew it. I was like, oh my God, this is it. I've got maybe a half second of life left, I'm dead. I didn't think I was dead, I knew it. There's a big difference when you know your moment is there. And that's the first time I ever had to contemplate my own death. Most people don't like to think about that. But since that day on, I've been thinking about that and trying to learn everything I could about what happened to me. Excuse me. So when that happened, I had this hyper awareness, and there was this temporal distortion, time expansion thing happening that I cannot begin to describe. I'm going to try, but there's no way I can tell you what was really going on. But I could see this guy. I couldn't hear him because, you know, he's out of the plane and I'm inside and we're going by him. But the guy on top of the fire truck, I can see him screaming in terror at the top of his lungs. His eyes are huge. I can see this big bulge sticking out on his forehead, his vein sticking out so far. He's screaming so hard. I could see this on his head, and everything is 1 second felt like it took a minute. And it was just the weirdest experience of that. I mean, imagine 1 second now feels like a minute. How much can you see in a minute if you had 1 second event happen, you had a minute to look at it? It's astonishing. It's hard to describe that. I don't know how to do that, but that's what was going on. And I think what was happening was my soul was getting ready to leap out of my body because it wasn't going to stick around for the carnage. It knew what was about to happen. It's like, I'm out of here. That's the only explanation I can come up with. And ever since I've read and learned about since, that's the only thing that makes sense to me. So the wingtip went over the fire truck. The number 4 propeller, which is 13 feet in diameter, weighs 2,200 pounds, is turning at 1,020 rounds a minute and moving at 135 knots, missed that fire truck. That's how close I came to not being here today. And somehow, by the grace of God, we missed that fire truck. Excuse me. Lloyd, is it okay if I just set this down? It keeps blocking. Now, I'm on this massive adrenaline rush. And I don't know how I could I don't know how I knew this, but after we went by the fire truck, at that point, I've got this external awareness going. I had my own perspective happening of what I was experiencing in my body looking out the flight station through the windshield. But yet I knew when the fire truck decided to pull out and move, I didn't see it physically, but I knew it. I don't know how. I knew I could see it in my mind's eye. The fire truck turned around and started chasing us. You know, that's what they do after you have an incident or you go down the runway. They're going to follow you in case something goes wrong, so they can be there right there. And so now, I'll never forget these guys' names. Had Lieutenant Dan Duffy in the right seat, the co-pilot, and Lieutenant Mike Lovgren, who made the landing in the left seat. And Mr. Lovgren, the pilot, is not doing anything to correct this problem. He's in shock, I think. And we're still moving real fast, and Lieutenant Duffy recognizes he's not doing anything. He goes, "Get on the brakes." Nothing happens. A little louder, second time, "Get on the brakes." Nothing happens. The third time, it's really loud. "You better get on the brakes." And that's when Lovgren kind of woke up and you can't hit the brakes, but he meant stop, because if you hit the brakes, you'll blow your main mounts out. That's not how you stop the plane. You use reverse thrust to do that with. So he slammed it into reverse thrust. Now we're in between the runways where it's not clean. I mean, there's debris out there and stuff. I'm sure they clean it from time to time, but you're going to have dust particles and rocks and stuff out there that you won't have on a regular runway because it's being blown clean all the time from planes taking off. And when he went into reverse thrust, before that happened, what I could see on this other runway was a big, huge device that one side, it sits on both sides of the runway, and what it is a resting gear retractor for the fighter jets that come in and practice carrier landings on the runway, and this is the cable they would snatch onto to stop the plane. So this thing's bolted in the ground. It's not going to move if you hit it. It is half the size of a school bus, and it's definitely secured extremely well in the ground. If it's strong enough to stop a fighter jet, it's not going to move if your plane hits it. If it does, it won't go far. And so that's the last thing I saw as the pilot slammed into reverse thrust. And I'm seeing everything in super slow motion. Remember, I'm getting this whole thing is occurring. It's taking forever to happen. And then all this dust flew up and trash and debris, and it obscured our vision as if we were landing in a snowstorm and threw all the snow up. It just blinded you. You couldn't see anything anymore. And I'm thinking, now the last thing I saw was this arresting gear device coming at us, and we're still doing over 100 knots. And I'm thinking, that's it. I survived. I didn't die the first time, but now I'm about to die again. I'm just waiting for to hit, because that's what we were headed for. All of a sudden I felt this lurch, and then the reverse thrust dropped, and we kind of came to a stop, and we somehow went off to the right of that device, the resting gear device, and we landed. We stopped. It was a slight slope on the runway to get on or off the edge of the runway, and what we did was our starboard main mount and nose gear went up on the side of that slope. It's about a 2.5, 3 foot raised slope to get on the runway platform. We had gone all the way across at a 45-degree angle from one runway to the other, and ended up half on, half off runway 4 right. So I started landing on runway 4 left, and now I'm half on, half off runway 4 right, and I realized I'm still alive, and I came down off my adrenaline rush, and I was exhausted. I cannot begin to describe to you just the weight of what it felt like to survive that and then have all your adrenaline go away. It literally felt like I ran 3 marathons back to back. I just had no energy left. I look to my right, and I see Lieutenant Duffy. I watch him come down off his. He's still tense as I looked at him, and then he just slumped. And then I'm looking at Duffy to the right. I hear this sound on my left, and the sound sounds like this. Whoa, whoa. What is that? And I turn to the left, and here's Lieutenant Lovgren, still on his adrenaline rush, white knuckling the yokes, as white as a sheet. He's not looking at anybody, he's looking straight out the window, right? Kind of talking to himself. And he keeps trying to do that, and he finally goes, "What did I do wrong?" Like, whoa, right? And so then a couple of minutes, a minute or so later, all of a sudden the fire trucks show up. We'd forgotten about them. And then there's a bunch of guys sitting in the back of the plane they don't have windows. They don't know anything's wrong. They think it's a normal landing so far. Okay? And so one of them, the tactical coordinator, calls up and he goes, Flight, he's the guy that coordinates the mission when we track a submarine, and and the strategy of it. It tells the pilots where to fly to put sonar buoys in the water and stuff like that. But he calls up and says, flight aft. And we're like, he goes, yeah. He said, when we're off the runway, do you think you can release the crew? Because it was taking a long time. Normally, as soon as we stop, crew you're released and let them up, and they go about getting their post-flight duties ready to get off the plane. And Lieutenant Duffy goes, aft flight. Man, we're way off the runway. He didn't know what to think of that, so he comes up and walks up in the flight station, and the tactical coordinator does, and he looks around, and he just says, oh my God, he didn't want to know, and he walked down the left. He just was there like a second or two, and it said not long enough to say, oh my God, and leave. He just didn't want to know. And then the fire trucks had shown up by then, and so we're communicating with them through the tower with radio communication, and they let us know nothing's wrong with the plane. Apparently, it seemed fine. So we literally finished adding power to get up on forward right and then roll out and finish the landing. So I literally used 2 different runways to make one landing and one approach. And I don't ever want to do that again. Okay, that was not my idea. You know, there's a definition of aviation. I don't know if you've ever heard it or not. Some of you military types in here that flew know what that is. But it's hours and hours and hours and hours of boredom interspersed with moments of stark freaking terror. And that's what I experienced. I experienced abstract, absolute terror in that instant. And the only thing I could think of was my 2.5-year-old son at home. And I was never going to see him again. And the next day, the commanding officer took us back out to go fly again. Put us back on the horse to get us going, you know. They wouldn't do that today because they have a better understanding of the stresses and post-traumatic stress syndrome and that kind of thing, and they would never expose you to that kind of thing until they worked with you for a while to put you back in that environment right away. But that was the way of thinking of the aviation community in the day. And so the skipper, who's an instructor pilot, goes out with us the next day, and I've got Lieutenant Lundgren in the left seat again. And I did not think anything about it. I just didn't even consider that it would be an issue for me. I mean, okay, I've been flight out over probably 4,000 flight hours by then, you know. So I go out and do my pre-flight, and get everything ready, and make the takeoff, and I'm fine. I'm not thinking about it at all until we started the final approach, and I was looking at that again. Then I started understanding. I started experiencing that terror again. I'm going to run this back through and show you something. So I'm sitting in my seat with my knees right up here, and I typically would sit straight up and just have a 180-degree view of everything in front of me. You know, as we watched the approach and we needed to wave off, my job would be to bend forward and shove the power levers. Well, I'm panicking inside. I can't let the skipper sitting right there, okay? I knew if he knew that I was not mentally there and I was freaking out, I'd never fly again. I knew that. And by the way, I'm already in the air. I can't exactly say, hey, skipper, I don't want to do this. Can I go bail out? It's not, you know, that's not an option anymore. I'm in the air, I'm committed, so I've got to get on the ground somehow. And so I could not look outside. So instead of the normal sitting up looking out like I usually did and scanning all my gauges and everything, I've been over, put my hand on the power levers and just focused on those engine gauges in front of me. That's all I could do. And my head was not in the ballgame. And if we had had some sort of malfunction then, I probably would not have caught it because my head was in terror again. And I experienced that same adrenaline rush to a certain degree. It wasn't as intense, but it was there. And so that the incident happened on a Monday. The next flight happened on a Tuesday. And then this kind of sounds totally unrelated, but I think these 2 events, especially the first one, opened up some sort of doorway for me, because on Wednesday, remember, I'm only 24 years old. You think you're an adult, maybe doing adult things at 24, but you're not really mature like, you know, the life experiences give you at the age I'm at now. I'm a much different person, as most of us are, I would hope. But that Wednesday, I'm watching a television show, on Wednesday evening, it used to come on back then, called That's Incredible. Some of you might remember that show. And it had Kathy Lee Crosby on there, and Frank Gifford, and they were the co-hosts. They ended up marrying after that, but that's how they met. And they had a woman on there, elderly woman, I don't remember her name, telling her story about where she had had a dream where God had come to her in her sleep and told her, you're going to be, she couldn't have children. She was in her early 40s at the time when this happened. And he said, you will be offered 3 babies, infants, for adoption soon, and you're to take the baby boy that's blind. And within a year, she said, that's exactly what happened. And she did what God expected of her, knowing that that was her mission in life. That was part of why she was here. Well, they did adopt the baby boy, and not only did, and I remember his name was Leslie. For some reason, I still remember his name. As he grew up, it became very apparent at an early age that he not only was blind, he had no cognitive skills beyond that of a 1-day-old infant his whole life. He never responded to his name. He never talked, any of that. He just was nobody home. He was like a 5 foot 10 inch, a 200-pound baby at 26, 27 years old when they had him on the show. And so she said the reason she was on the show with her son is because one night she had heard music in the middle of the night after he's an adult, you know. And she went downstairs thinking somebody left the television or the radio on. She was going to go turn it off and go back to bed. It's like 2, 3 in the morning. Here's Leslie sitting at the piano, playing perfectly, singing the song Amazing Grace with tears going down his eyes. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing, you know. And then they brought him, I said, that's incredible, or the show, that's incredible. They brought him out and introduced him and tried to talk with him. You could tell he was not there. He literally was drooling. I mean, at times she kept wiping his chin off, you know, with a napkin. And then they sat him down in front of the piano, and he started playing and singing. And I was just floored with the beauty of his voice. And I call it, it had a sound that I call hauntingly holy voice. It just penetrated the heart. And he sang 2 or 3 songs. It wasn't just one. But when he got up away from the piano, he was no longer there. And I thought at that point that I had just witnessed my first miracle. I now understand this microphone in my hand, these people in front of me, this whole environment I live in this universe is a miracle. I know that now, but back then I didn't understand what a miracle really meant. So I'm thinking I'm seeing my first miracle. And so that night I went to sleep. But before I went to sleep, I said a simple prayer of just genuine gratitude, really. I said, thanking God for allowing me to live from that experience. I've always believed in God, but my concept of God has dramatically changed in the last 32 years, especially after that incident. And I said, Lord, thank you so much for letting me see this miracle on television too. And I thought that was the first miracle. It was just a genuine prayer of gratitude. And then I added, not thinking anything's going to come of it. I said, and Lord, it'd be nice if you could do something like that for me someday. That was all I said. I didn't even say it out loud. I said it in my head, laying on my back in bed. I wasn't even on my knees or anything like that. It was just laying in bed and saying a prayer right before I went to sleep. And sometime in the middle of the night, I don't know, 3:30, 4, dark 30 we used to call it in the military, all of a sudden, I didn't go through a tunnel, I didn't have an out-of-body experience, although I think that's what was going on to a certain degree, I'm not really sure, but all of a sudden, I am in a different dimension, and my consciousness is seeing this golden light, white in the center, just unbelievably beautiful. And the golden light was coming off in streams in all directions, just like pinnacles, icicle-type points to them, and recreating themselves, and it was just pulsating. And I knew I was in the presence of God. And the gold was so The gold was so beautiful, it makes the finest gold you've ever seen on earth look like a 1,000-year-old nasty rusted nail. It does not compare to the gold here. It's just a completely different quality of, I don't even know how to explain it. That's the problem. That's the problem. There are no human words to explain to you what it's like, but I'm going to do my best. I was being communicated to, not with words, but with waves of emotional, energetic energy that had, I sensed the power. First of all, the love was unconditional. I cannot stress that enough. And I say that, and I don't mean to offend anyone who has a deep belief in the Christian religion, but that didn't, what I experienced, that love that I experienced, did not fit with the story I've been told of how Christianity works. And because I knew the love was unconditional, flat out unconditional. And I wish I could go around and touch people and just have them experience that degree of love like I did, so they knew what I'm talking about. And sometimes people get offended when I tell them that. That is not my intent to offend anyone or begrudge anybody's religion, because that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to express to you what I experienced. So the love was immensely powerful. And let me tell you what the love felt like. This is the best analogy I've been able to come up with so far. Now, this is coming from a guy who did what I did in the Navy, top secret security clearance and all this stuff. In 1980, I saw a UFO 1,500 feet directly over my head in the Azores Islands, about 900 miles off the Atlantic, off the Portugal coast in the middle of the Atlantic. And I watched this thing brighten up into a plasma ball, shoot out into the Milky Way, and was gone in 4 to 5 seconds. Until I lost sight of it. I mean, that's the jaw-dropping, astonishing speed. This is 1980. We didn't have laptops. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have home computers. We didn't have any of that stuff. So this was technology far beyond anything that we were making, probably still today. I'm not sure. But anyway, I say that because I now believe that the universe is filled with life. Intelligent life as well. Some far more intelligent than us, probably. And so the love felt like I was the last newborn child to be born that's ever lived or ever will live again in the entire history of the universe, being hugged, loved, cradled, and cherished by every mother that had ever lived before that. Imagine what that must be like. You mothers in here know what that felt like when you held your first baby for the first time. Imagine on the scale I just told you. And then realize that is nowhere near good enough to explain what happened. That is, it was trillions and trillions of times infinitely more special than that. And I had no idea that I was that loved. And I know it's the same for each and every one of you. That's the unconditional love that was flooding through me. Just, and if the light, I know this, that God was a being of light, pure consciousness. I don't know how to explain it all. I was just there trying to understand the power of everything that was going on. But if a being of light could do backflips with extreme joy and saying, wahoo, yes, he's home, let's have a party, that God was thrilled to see me again. Absolutely mind-bogglingly thrilled that I was there again. And it's going to be the same way for you when you go home. Speaking of home, I knew I was home. There was this energetic information of feeling like I was home. Like I had never had anywhere here or ever will. I was my source of origin, my point of creation. I knew I was in the presence of my Creator. I knew I am far more special than I had no idea that, and we're all that way. It's the same for everybody. And some people don't like hearing this, but I think everybody gets in. And we have a life review process on the other side, and it's from more than one perspective. You won't just have it, like I told you when I was in the airplane, I had this perspective of being in the seat, but yet I had this other outside perspective going on, and I knew where everything else was. I could tell you where the debris was flying behind the plane while I'm sitting in it. How can you do that? You know, I had this bubble, 360-degree bubble vision. If you imagine yourself in a bubble and you can see every direction at once and know what's going on at an extreme detailed aware level. The Bible says, God says, I know the number of the hairs on your head. He's not kidding, okay? He knows the number of subatomic particles in the hair on your head, okay? And I say he, there was no sense of gender when I was in the light. It was just this exquisitely beautiful being of light with profound unconditional love. And the power of that love was absolutely immense. And my best analogy for that is, and I said 3 words. I remember saying, because I was just in dumbfounded, flabbergasted awe, just extreme awe. Oh my goodness. I mean, I was like, I didn't know what else, it just came out, you know. It was just a reaction to what I was seeing, of just pure awe. And the instant the word goodness came out of my mind, or mouth, or what, I don't know, I suddenly knew goodness was a tangible, real thing, its own energy wave of frequency, and it was powerful too. But yet love was the most powerful. And then I understood all of a sudden there was this hierarchical aspect going with love being by far the most powerful thing that has ever existed here, ever will exist. It's infinitely powerful. And then all of a sudden, after I said goodness, I experienced that, what that's like, and then I had joy, bliss, ecstasy, any kind of positive emotional experience you can think of to the extreme. To the point I thought I was just going to explode. I was just overwhelmed with wham, 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 joy, bliss, ecstasy. Oh, wow. It was just one after the other. Like, you're precious. The peace that I experienced on the other side is profound peace. I know what holiness feels like. I felt that. That's not just a word. It's a real experience that you will have again when you go home. And so I woke up, I know this isn't a dream, and this was not a dream, and here's why I know this. There was this point in this experience where I had this, my heart, I call it my heart of my soul, had this desire and this urge to go be closer and immerse it completely in the light. That's what, it was a natural, instinctive process that occurs. And remember, I'm 24 years old, I'm healthy, physically fit back then, and I think if my soul had left my body, it would look like a perfectly healthy man that just died in his sleep, and it would confuse the doctors big time and wonder what happened to this guy. But as my soul started experiencing this desire to merge, this tremendous desire to merge, I literally physically sat up in bed and opened my eyes, okay? And I'm sitting up in bed looking at the end of the room, and your bedroom's on the other side of that wall, okay, at the time. And the whole room is filled with this golden light pouring in the room. It's like 1 billion suns in my bedroom. And if you take like a 10-foot circle and draw it on the wall and part of the ceiling and floor, that it had gone away, and this God is in my bedroom. God was in my bedroom. And I knew it. I'm watching this with my human eyes now. And I watched this for 2 or 3 seconds, and then I watched the circle, not instantly, but rather quickly, shrink down concentrically and close and go away. And I sat there for the next hour and a half till the sun came up, just crying. Just overwhelming, having had an overwhelming, deeply loving experience. And I remember thinking during the light when it was on, I kind of glanced at your mom, and I'm like, how could she be asleep? How can she be asleep with all this going on? She never moved, never moved. And the rest of the night, I watched this residual spiritual energy, I guess, I don't know what else to call it, in the wall in that area where it was kind of undulating with light. The whole thing was like, I just sat there all night, the rest of the night, you know, just couldn't stop crying. And so I know, first of all, even if I hadn't woken up and looked at it, I would have known it was the most real thing that ever happened to me, by far. But I think God did that so that I wouldn't doubt myself later, okay? Because what happened that next, and so back then I didn't know where to go for help. I mean, nobody was talking about near-death experiences or spiritually transformative experiences, which is what I consider mine to be. I think mine's a combination of both. I had a near-death experience, nearly dying on Monday, and then I had a spiritually transformative experience on Wednesday, all within like a little over 48 hours, you know. Slipped my mind where I was going with this. So I know it wasn't a dream because of that. And the next Sunday, I didn't know where to go for help. Oh, I know what I was going to say. Nobody's talking about near-death experiences back in that time frame. There were a few books out, but we didn't have the internet. We didn't have cell phones. You know, you didn't have instant access to information like we do today to go learn these things and to learn more about them. So I went to the only place I knew, and we were going to church at a place in Waianae called the Waianae Baptist Church. And it was half Japanese, some local Hawaiians, and a few military families. And it was nice. They used to sing hymns. Half the hymns were sung in Japanese. So it was a nice church. And this particular day, the primary pastor was on vacation or something, and we had a guest pastor from the mainland. He was probably mid to late 30s. I remember that back then was when the Superman movie came out, and he just looked a lot like Christopher Reeve. He had the build and the blue eyes and the black hair, a very handsome man. And he's older than me at the time too, so I thought I'd get my answer from this guy, you know, what happened to me. And it was 2 years before I could tell this story without just crying and being able to control my emotions of that experience, because it would flash back to me and flood through me. And sometimes that still happens. I go to every 2 months to an International Association of Near-Death Studies group in Boston. And a couple of times now, we've had other guest speakers speaking, and they start talking about it, and I get this empathetic wave of energy flash through me, and I just sit there and cry in the chair. And I try to be quiet about it. It is very humbling experience being in that life. And you know, I don't remember where it says it in the Bible, but it talks about every man will kneel before God. It's because the love is so profound, and you're so humbled by how precious you are to this individual, this being of light with its own personality, who created me. And you can't help but be humbled. It's just the nature of being in that environment of eternity. I experienced another dimension. So I went up to this pastor, was able to express myself, but I'm crying the whole time. And he didn't say anything. He just kind of, first he was listening very intently, you know, as I told my story. And he kind of cocked his head, and kind of did that with his eyes or something, I don't know, and then he did this. And walked away. Did not say a word to me. And I'm like, you know, I'm very vulnerable at that time. I needed an answer, and I felt like I got abandoned. And later I got angry. I left the church crying, just going, I didn't understand. So now something else powerful just happened to me, what happened. And at the time, being an immature young man, I chose to take offense. But I now understand that this man didn't have an answer, no more so than I did. So I just thought he would because he was in the church, and he had not had an experience. How can anybody else who's never experienced something like that know what to tell you? You know, but I didn't understand that back then. I did not. And so I chose to take offense to it. And at that point I got angry. I got angry with God because I didn't get to stay there. I felt like I got abandoned that way too. Because I wanted to stay. I didn't want to come back here. but I didn't have a choice. I wasn't even asked. It just, I'm back in the bed, you know. It wasn't like, I knew I wanted to be with it because that urge to merge was there, but so I walked away from the church, from God, from everything that had anything to do with it for about 10 years. I did not want anything to do with it. And I left a trail of emotional damage in my life like you read about it. And hopefully one day when I'm done with my book, you will read about it. But, and then I started seeking a God of my own understanding instead of what someone else was telling me. And I started with my religion, which was Christianity. And I needed to understand everything I could. I'm an engineer, right? My mind has to have detailed answers before I'm satisfied that I have a truth, that my personal truth that means something to me. So for the next 22 years, I dove deep first into religion. I studied the origins of Christianity, how the Bible was put together, everything I could learn about it. And then I went on and learned about Sufism. I don't know if you've heard about the Sufi religion. Zoroastrianism, Hinduism, Buddhism, you name it. If it had an ism, I looked it up and learned about it. I call it ism now an internal spiritual malady. So if you have an ism, it's probably spiritual in nature. And go correct that internal spiritual malady and find your contentment and happiness in life, and go through life with an attitude of gratitude, you're going to be fine. But after I did the deep search in religion, I needed to understand, and this is now when technology has gotten better, and we have the internet, things like that, and have a lot more access to information. Really cool things are coming out to learn about. And so I learned about the smallest particles, subatomic particles, and that they pop in and out of existence. They create atoms, which create everything else above that. So you're literally, every subatomic particle in your body is constantly popping in and out of existence. That's a mystery and a miracle in and of itself when you think about that. That's proven through quantum physics. And I studied quantum physics. I studied quantum entanglement. I studied quadratic mechanics. I learned everything I could about the universe, all the way up to and including from the subatomic particles to the solar system, how it was created, to and how it evolved. And I learned about evolution throughout the universe, all the way up to quasars, pulsars, supermassive black holes, and all of that. And then one day, but I still didn't quite understand it. How could God do all this? One day I glanced at Einstein's equation, and I was watching something on television, and all of a sudden it clicked. I'm like, that's it. E equals mc squared. Energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. The beauty of math is you can flip your equation and check your math, right? Everybody knows that. You learned that in elementary school. Well, c squared, light, is equal to energy divided by mass. That being of light and love is so intelligent that God took particles of his own light, used a 13.7 billion year long recipe to create all the mass and energy in the universe, and through evolution, an ordinary process, that you and I can stand here and talk about that. How intelligent is a God that can do that? That's the God I've learned about. And I'm satisfied with that answer. Believe me, I really dug deep to learn everything I could, and I still question. So if I can give you any advice at all, is keep asking questions. And the other things I've learned over time is that the universe, everybody thinks about when they have a prayer, they make a conscious prayer, okay, and they pray for something or for someone, and those are good things. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. I'm thinking that everybody should do that. Prayer is very powerful. Once you understand it on the energetic level and how all thought spreads through the entire universe through quantum entanglement, then you start to understand how powerful your thoughts really are. And so what most people don't understand, that I've come to realize, is all thought is prayer. and you live in a responsive universe that is going to reflect back to you and give you what you want, what it thinks you want. And so I've learned over the years to change my thinking to try and be positive as much as I can. And I don't succeed at that all the time. I'm human just like everybody else. I have my rough days, but I try. And I've seen my life just completely, it's changed and become so enjoyable and fulfilling. And I've learned to pay attention to synchronicity events. These are little events where, or especially deja vu events too, those combined. These are little events that are occurring that let me know I'm on the right path. And sometimes when I think I'm on the right path and I realize things are being shut down on me, or I guess I'm not supposed to walk that way, so I ask the question to God. I call it God, or some people say I put it out to the universe. They're the same thing. Because once you understand all matter, all mass, and all energy is God, made by God, of God, we are all a piece and a portion of God. And I believe God is a now, an infinite, this is my belief system now, an infinite being exploring an infinite number of universes and dimensions. And I know there's more than one dimension because I was in the other one. Okay, so I can't deny that to myself anymore. That's my personal truth. Exploring an infinite number of universes, expanding consciousness. And so what I've learned is it's all about the evolution of consciousness, both God's consciousness and our own individual consciousness. I don't understand the big picture, what ultimately is going to happen when all this process is over with. I now believe in reincarnation. And like I said, I don't need to offend anybody with their belief system and religion. I believe Christ was a real person. I believe that he was teaching some spiritual principles that I found as I studied all these other religions. All of them have very similar spiritual principles, but then they all have certain man-made agendas applied into them, built into them for whatever reasons. Or they're misunderstood, and individual egos try and apply their belief on that and push it on the rest of the world or something. I don't know. I've learned to be very respectful of other people's beliefs, and because God is. And I've learned that God's free will. He believes, God will let me believe and act and do anything I want, because I know the love is unconditional and I can never do anything wrong. And it's all just a learning, the mistakes are for the learning process, period. It's for spiritual growth, for learning. And the life review process I was talking about before, that's a spiritual growth tool. It isn't meant to punish anyone. But again, someone like Hitler had a life review, not just from his own experience, his own personal experience, but every life he ever affected, as if he was in, as if he were in their body, experiencing their consciousness and their experience as his own, because people, we are all one. We literally are all one. And that's what Christ meant when he said, what you do to me, or what you do to others, you do to me also. He wasn't kidding at all. He really wasn't kidding. And I think his message has either been deeply misunderstood or manipulated over the years. But that's my place. That's where I've come to. I'm not sure where else I can go with this other than I keep seeking, I keep asking. I'm now in the process of learning how to meditate. There's a guy named Dr. Eben Alexander. I don't know if you've heard of him.
He's been here. He was here.
I met him. I've got a picture of me and him standing beside each other on my cell phone. And he and I email from time to time. And, you know, he was of the same ilk. He used to think that consciousness couldn't exist outside the brain. That changed. You know, his belief system changed because he had a directive divine experience, as what happened to me. And I'm not trying to change anybody's mind. God will allow complete free will. I call it the hula hoop rule. To put a hula hoop around me, right? Everything inside that hula hoop is my business. My beliefs, my truth, my whatever. Everything outside that hula hoop is yours and your belief, and I have no right to step inside your hula hoop and start telling you what to think or how to believe or any of that. And God's the same way. Because God's love is eternal, God's patience is eternal, and I now believe that reincarnation is the only thing that makes sense once I studied all of that and figured it all out. And that God's patience is so infinite that God can wait as long as God needs to for me to grow up and stop acting like a child and to start growing spiritually and learning the principles I need to learn to expand my consciousness so I can go home and stay home one day. I don't know if I have more incarnations left, but I feel like I've learned a lot this time around. And it's partly because of the times we live in with access to information and things of that nature. But I think the old, some of the very ancient knowledge was lost. It's still out there about spirituality and connectedness and all of that. And it was not presented in the scientific way that I just described to you with an understanding at that level, but they had an understanding of it. The ancient Indians, the Mayans, or whatever, however far back you want to go. There's evidence out there that's been discovered through archaeological finds that that's the belief systems, and they very similar. The Hopi Indians, all over the world, it was, cultures that never ever met each other in the same place. I believe that partially, I don't understand the complete connection, that they are alien beings from other universes, other galaxies or solar systems, whatever you want to call it, are here visiting us. There's a man named Mr. Stone, I don't remember his rank in the military, he had direct experience with that. He said, I think he was working for, I don't remember what branch in CIA or something like that, I can't remember. Said that they had cataloged 57 different variety of species of aliens that are coming here visiting our planet now. So I saw my own, I watched it. I know it was not of this earth. So I have to take all of these experiences and try and find a way to piece them all together so that they make sense to me and try to understand the big picture. I think there are certain entities in this world, that the elite, if you want to call them, the ultra-rich, that are perpetrating certain problems against this world that they're going to wish they'd never done when they have a life review. It's big oil, big pharmaceutical, big agriculture, and big banks, and big government. It doesn't just mean the U.S. government. So if you really want to learn that picture and the impact of all that from a spiritual perspective too, go to a website called thrivemovement.com. THRIVE, movement, all one word, .com, and there's a movie there. It takes about 2 hours to watch. But it's by a guy named Foster Gamble, who is the son of one of the owners of Procter & Gamble. Okay? And he was being groomed for the corporate world, and he was recognizing what was going on at these upper levels and walked away from that and chose the spiritual path. And wait till you see his movie. And all of my knowledge and seeking and things that I've figured out and pieced together over the years are talked about in this video. And I went, somebody else has come to the same conclusion I have. I can't wait to talk to these people. And I've been connecting with them, and so we'll see where that goes. But Einstein once said the universe is not only strange, it's far stranger than you can imagine. Oh yeah, there are far more things happening, going on beyond our awareness level that many people don't want to comprehend, don't even want to look at. It's too much for them to understand that. There was a time in my life where I used to try and force these ideas on people, like, you got to understand me, you got to understand me. And I don't do that anymore. Now I'm a lot more discerning about who I open up to when I talk to people. And I let my intuition, by the way, that's the other thing, your spiritual path, listen to your intuition. Your intuition is your higher self, your higher soul self communicating with you. And you know, if you listen, what that is. So anyway, that's pretty much my experience and my story and my path, and I appreciate you guys coming to listen. And thank you so much for being here. Thank you. Lloyd, do you want, should we open up for questions?
Some questions.
Yeah, okay.
My first question is, what was the movement that...
Thrive, T-H-R-I-V-E. T-H-R-I-V-E, like you thrive in a community. Movement.com.
Okay, thank you.
And then go click on the link that says movie and watch the movie. And it's absolutely amazing. I did a very professional job with that too. It's astonishing, the graphics and the knowledge and the storyline is outstanding.
Did you maintain your flight engineer job in the Navy after that?
No. I got out of the military, worked for Boeing for 2 years, and that's the union, so you're not seniority at the point when they start letting people go. But I worked on the 777 program for 2 years, and for the last year I was there, I was promoted to the quality, I was working in quality assurance division, and we were building the front end and aft end of the airplane. And so it would drop in as an empty shell, all metal, waiting for everything else to get installed, and then we put it all together. And with one production line, every 2.5 days, we were putting a fully functional flyable 777 out the door minus a paint job. And they were just amazing process. But I worked the second year I was there, I was promoted to a quality assurance supervisor, and I was leading a team of 65 people on second shift building 777. Yes, Gary?
Tony, I happen to know that you have some really interesting UFO stories. Would you mind sharing those?
Sure.
Will you repeat the question?
She said that Carrie and I know each other. We met a little over 2 years ago when I spoke at the Fellowship of Interlight Church the first time I came down to Virginia Beach. And we've communicated over time with that since then. And when I was in the Azores, I'll tell that story. I was 1980. I was 23 years old, and we were on our way to Sigonella, Sicily, to start a 6-month deployment. It was August of 1980. So we landed in the Azores, and we had a problem with the plane. It had a hydraulic leak on the aircraft. It had to be fixed before we could fly again. So the rest of the crew all went up, got in the bus, and went up to the barracks to get checked in and cleaned up and go up to the base club and get something to eat. And we were going to leave the next morning. But myself and the hydraulics, when we fixed the problem, we had to stay behind. As an engineer, you're always one of the last ones to leave the plane. You got to make sure you put the plane to bed, write up all the discrepancies on the aircraft, and if need be, when you're away from the maintenance department, you have to fix your own airplane. And so he and I stayed behind to correct the problem, and we fixed it. We got up to the barracks ourselves and got cleaned up and started walking up the hill to the base club to go get something to eat. It was after hours, so the chow hall was already closed, and the only place to get something to eat was the base club. And by the way, we weren't drinking because we had a 12-hour time limit from the next flight, and there's a 12-hour, we called it 12-hour throttle to bottle, or bottle to throttle limit. So anyway, we were completely sober, in other words. And so Tommy and I got cleaned up. I'll never forget this kid. His name's Tommy Breedman. He was from New York, somewhere in New York. Tall, handsome, young black kid. He was a second-class petty officer. And we're walking together on the road that goes right by the air traffic control tower. And in the Azores, that tower's up on a hill, and you can see out over the water. Remember, you're in the middle of the Indian Ocean, the Pacific Ocean. Excuse me, the Atlantic Ocean. I've flown over too many waters in the world. Sometimes I'm confused. I've literally been to every continent but Australia and Antarctica, and flown over all the oceans in the world except for the Antarctic Ocean. Anyway, the Atlantic Ocean, get that out. You can see out over the ocean very clearly. There's no moon that night. It's a crystal clear, no humidity night. You can see the Milky Way splashed out across the sky. It's just spectacular. I'll never forget thinking how that's the best view I've ever had of the Milky Way, on the ground especially. And so we're walking along, and we were getting up next to their traffic control tower. So they've got a view of 360 view out over the water, and you're up above the runway, which is down below, and up from where we are, which is, I don't know, 400 or 500 feet up elevated. You can look down and see the hangar with all the airplanes on the ramp and all of that, and the runway, whole length of the runway is an 11,000-foot runway. And I see something out of the corner of my eye, and I'm thinking it's probably an airplane coming in for a landing, for approach, because anytime you're in controlled airspace and you're below 10,000 feet altitude, whether it's daylight or not, you have to have your landing lights on. It's just a little bit extra protection for somebody who might be able to see you better. And then I did a double take because it wasn't the right color. You know, it wasn't a white light like a normal landing light is on an airplane. And I looked out at it, and I realized it was only like a mile and a half out offshore, probably about 1,500 feet off the water. And it wasn't moving. I realized it was stationary. And I'm like, we're way too far out for helicopters, you know, number one, out over the water. And I said, Tommy, I stopped, I grabbed him by the arm, and I pulled him stop, and I said, Tommy, what is that? He looks too, and then he goes, I don't know. As soon as he said, I don't know, this thing brightened up into a plasma ball, shot across the entire length of the horizon, which had to be 10, 15 miles in an instant, so fast, I couldn't track it with my eyes. It was gone, and then I had to go look. Okay, that's how fast it moved. Whoa, Tommy, that's no airplane. No. And then it dimmed back down, and it's this reddish, brownish light that seemed to, and I'll describe that a little bit better when I talk to the next move it made. So it's sitting there for about a minute or two, I don't remember how long, and we're like, oh, what do we have? I mean, we're saying whatever we're saying, I can't remember our words, but we're very animated and excited, I'll guarantee you that. And then it brightened up again, this time it came directly at us, in an instant. Whew. Where'd it go? Tommy looks up and he goes, it's up there. Oh my God, it's 1,500 feet at the most above us, and sitting there, dead still. It's about 150 feet in diameter. It had a very fat, thick, round edge, and there was a hump in the middle, like a lenticular shape, that was probably 40, 45 feet around, and about 25 feet tall off the top of the thickest part of the ship. It was clearly a structured craft, and it was clearly under intelligent control. It was clearly technology beyond anything I even could comprehend and knew existed. And I'm thinking, it is clearly not from this planet, okay? And so, but when it dimmed down back from the plasma ball, it had this, I don't even know how to explain it. The skin on the craft was like the light on it was all sliding all over it and changing. It was yellow here, black, red, brown, red. I mean, it was all the different combinations of colors from black to pretty bright yellow, not quite white. But it wasn't just light staying in one place. It was sliding all over the plane, and like a camouflage chameleon thing happening all at once, but it was sliding. Wow. And then it brightened up again and shot back to its original position the first time we saw it. And for the next 10 or so minutes, it kept doing this pattern. So it was the original position, way out there, right over our head, short leg back to the original position. So you had 10, 15 miles, whatever that length was, out. Same distance back over our head, mile and a half out. So it was making this perfect triangle that was elongated triangle. And the last time it stopped directly over our head. And I'm thinking it's probably going to go back where it was before, right? But then the last time it stopped, it's not directly over us, it's kind of off this one side, so we're kind of looking at it at about that angle there, you know? And it jinked up like that. The side was flat at first, and it jinked up like an angle about like that, probably about 80 degrees, 75, 80 degree angle. Brightened up into a plasma ball, and in less than 5 seconds, it was deep in Milky Way lighting in the stars until the tiniest twinkle of light, I lost it. And I had outstanding vision back then. I still have very good long distance vision. But I had 20/10 vision. That's what the doctors told me. The pilots used to get angry because they couldn't stand it that a non-pilot had better vision than them. And they used to test me and call traffic when I wasn't on the headset, and they'd say, "Oh, we got traffic coming. Pay attention, see if you can see it." And they tested me one day, and I didn't see it. I'm like, "Oh, I don't see it. Where is it?" So they were calling bogus traffic to try and catch me lying. You know, it wasn't. And so 20/10 vision means what a person with 20/20 perfect vision can see at 1,000 feet. I could see just as clearly at 2,000 feet. So I had twice as good long distance vision as the perfect vision person. Yet, I watched this thing leave in 4 or 5 seconds and disappear in the distant stars in the Milky Way. Yes?
Tell a story when you were out mowing the lawn and that mothership
Oh.
came over.
Yeah, this happened in Exeter, New Hampshire. How did you know about that?
You told us.
Okay, I'm sorry, I don't remember reading it.
You had the fellowship in here.
Okay.
We were on the fellowship.
Yeah.
Can everybody see better?
Yeah, that's fine, you can do the lights up. Oh, gracious, sorry. I was mowing the yard about, I think it was 2005. And this, I'm just mowing the yard, you know, minding my own business. I've got about a 1/4 acre lawn. Been living up in that place since for about 11 years now in that house. And it was a beautiful summer day, and it was hot. And so I had a glass of ice water. It was actually just cold water. The ice had melted. That I stopped to get a drink of water with. You know, so I'm drinking it, and I bring it up like this, and I can see something through the bottom of the glass. I'm like, what is that? Because it's filling up the glass. I'm like, something in the sky. So I drop the glass, and there's this massive craft that is probably twice the size of an aircraft carrier, low in the sky. Now, it wasn't directly at me, but it was kind of like this. I'm looking down its starboard side, its right-hand side, from the nose, I guess it's the nose end of it. And the whole front end and most of the side and all the way down, there were these big windows, looked like windows, I guess. And I literally, I must have dropped my glass. I don't remember putting it down. Later when I looked around, my glass is on the ground. I still don't remember. I must have just dropped it, just, you know, one of those things. And I was torn. I didn't know whether I should run in the house and get my camera and try and get a picture of this thing, or keep watching it because it's going to be gone if I come back outside. It'd probably be, I just didn't want to stop looking at it either, you know. And then all of a sudden, the bottom of it looked like a common, it's hard to explain. It looked like rolling flames, but it had the consistency of liquid metal. The whole belly of this thing started doing that. And then it's kind of at an angle from me. And then I know this sounds silly, but if you've ever seen the Star Trek show where the ship stretches out and then the vacuum catches up and goes and it winks out into a light. Well, it did the stretch thing. And that's when because I was coming at me, you know, and I stumbled back and I fell on the ground. Maybe that's when I dropped the glass, I don't know. And I'm laying on my back, watching from over there, it was probably, I don't know, a mile away, stretch out over my head, and then the rest of it caught up to it, and it just disappeared. It made no sound whatsoever. I have no idea what it was doing. I didn't know what to do about it. I thought I'd call the Exeter Police Department. By the way, if you haven't heard about Exeter, New Hampshire, go read a book called The Exeter Incident. It happened in the 60s, where the police were involved. They saw it. Tom Mescarello, who's a friend of mine who still lives in Exeter, was involved in it when he was a young teenager. So get a book called The Exeter Incident, E-X-E-T-E-R. That's an amazing experience they had. Because it went on for several hours. It wasn't just a few minutes. And, excuse me. So I didn't know who to call, so I got in touch with, I looked it up online, so I need to tell somebody about this. And that's when I learned about the National UFO Reporting Center. And I filed a report and sent it there. And the next thing I know, I've got, you know, newspapers and news crews wanting to talk to me. I'm like, no, I don't want to go there. Because I just didn't feel like doing it at that time. I was worried about, I wouldn't care today. But back then I was more concerned with ridicule and all that stuff. And now I just don't care. Think what you will. Like I said, I've learned a lot since then. And I have my hula hoops, and what's outside my hula hoop is not my business. So, yes.
Do you think there are many other pilots who have had similar experiences but are just totally afraid to say something?
Absolutely. And I'll give you a perfect example of why. I don't know if you heard about the incident of the Japanese JAL airline pilot that was flying off the coast of Alaska one day. And they had a massive UFO, as I saw, off from their craft with smaller ones coming in and out of it, little scout ships. And it's paralleling them for how long would you think it was, Lloyd? Like an hour and a half? This was a long time.
There are a lot of radar footage.
Yep, they got all this radar footage. The government took all that data away and said this never happened. The FAA inspector that went to investigate this thing had all that data, and he speaks out vocally about it now. But here's why the pilots don't like talking about it. This pilot had probably, I think he supposedly had like 30,000 hours of flight experience. He was very experienced. He was flying a 747, okay, when this happened. And so they tried to get away from it, so they decided to make it, air traffic control gave them the authority to make a turn. They're talking to several different control towers, military, civilian. This is one of the most well-documented aviation UFO instances in history. Radar contacts, it was all there. So he's trying to make a turn to get away from it. And this thing's outside of him, massively bigger than, made the 777. Imagine what a little ultralight open craft plane would look like sitting next to a 747. I mean, that's the scale difference we're talking about. The 747s look like the ultralight compared to this vessel. And it's not only tracking him as he's making the turn, it's on the outside curve of the turn, which means he has to go faster to maintain his position relative to the plane that he was keeping. You got a 747 doing 500 miles an hour in a turn. This guy's gigantic, 2-3 times the size of an aircraft carrier, going faster than that, maintaining position, while other ships are flying in and out of it. And then the pilot reported it, and they grounded him, and he never flew again.
Wow.
So yes, pilots do not want to talk about it, because they know the government are going to squelch it, because the government is in on this. They know about it, and they have for a long time. I have the feeling that they are, more and more people I'm being connected with are, thank God for the internet. You know, I think the uber elite initiated the internet because of greed, and they knew they could make a lot of money with it. But their biggest downfall, as far as I think it was their biggest mistake, because they don't want mankind to awaken spiritually. But when we have access to information instantly, guess what happens to our awareness and our conscious level? We expand and we become more. And that was their biggest mistake, because that love is what controls everything. That love is what's really in power and control, and it cannot be stopped. It will not be stopped. And the truth is what the love cares about. And so there's going to come a day when all of this system that's going on economically and corporations and the way this is all working, it's not going to happen. It's not going to last. I'm not sure when or how, but one of these days it's going to collapse. And part of the reason is because the whole world now has access to this spiritual information that you can get online. If you haven't been to neardeath.com, you want to learn everything you can about spirituality and how it really works, go to neardeath.com, but put a dash, a hyphen between the two words, near and death. Near-death.com. You can spend years on that website learning things. It's broken down by category, it's broken down by experiences, it's broken down in so many different ways, it's broken down by religion, you name it. Near-death experiences, spiritual transformation, it's all got its own link and category, and there's tons of videos, tons of documents. You can spend forever there. Yes, excuse me, in the back.
What do you think the visitors are doing? What motivates them to come here, and why is the government covering it up?
I don't have all those answers, but this is my belief. Okay, I'm inside my hula hoop now, and I'm going to tell you what my belief and my truth is inside my hula hoop. Again, you're going to learn a lot more at thrivemovement.com.
We've seen it.
Okay, you know what I'm talking about. Thrive, THRIVE, movement, all one word, .com. But I had figured all this out before that. And what they're doing, if thrivemovement.com, which seems to make the most sense to me, and pieced it all together well, is what's going on. They don't want us to wake up spiritually and understand. I'll tell you what, this is what I explained to someone one day. Here's why they don't want us to wake up spiritually.
Who's they?
The government, the elite, whoever's running the world via economics, big banks. If you go to thrivemovement.com, you'll understand what I'm talking about. Watch that 2-hour-long video. They don't want us to wake up. You ever watched the movie A Bug's Life?
Yeah.
Some of you have seen A Bug's Life. There's this scene in A Bug. They got these big, mean grasshoppers that are dominating the ants. Okay, just terrifying them, threatening them. You know, if you don't give us all the food you have just barely enough to survive with, we're going to wipe you out. Type attitude. That's the bad bugs, the grasshoppers. And the lead mean grasshopper was named Hopper. Okay? So some of his minions, they're all in this cartoon bar, and they're being served up seeds out of this tequila bottle with an opening on the end, and he'll raise the opening, and one seed pops out, the grasshopper catches it and eats it. And so they start talking, and they're like, why do we have to go, they're supposed to go back to the ants and get all their food and keep them under their thumb, you know. And they're like, we don't want to do that, we got everything we need here, you know, why should we go bother these ants again? And they believe that they can go talk to Hopper, who's the mean leader of the group, and convince him that they don't need to go do that. So Hopper's like, plays along. Oh yeah, he starts talking with them. Sure, we got all we need right here. He opens up one of the things and a seed pops out, and he says, and it hits one of the grasshoppers in the chest. He goes, did that hurt? He goes, no, ha, ha, you know, laughing it up. Opens it up again, hits the other one. You can point it, name it, you know. Hits the other guy. He says, did that hurt? He goes, no, not at all. Not at all. And then he yanks the stopper out, and all these seeds come flooding out and slam these grasshoppers on, and buries them. He goes, that's why we go back and dominate the ants, because he was pretending the seeds were ants. One ant hit you, no big deal. One ant hit you. But when all the ants come at you, you don't have the power anymore. And that's what the government's afraid of. We're the ants. And they don't want us to wake up, because they'll lose their power and control. And that's what they're terrified of.
I know if you're familiar with Bill Cooper, but he wrote a book on Behold the Pale Horse, and the Navy was the one who would go to the sites of the UFOs. They had 3 different units. One of them would secure the site, the next one would take everything away, and the third one would put it all back together. But it also tells you in there why the government is doing that. And if you ever want to read about it, it's in Behold the Pale Horse.
I'll have to go look that up.
The government went out and killed him at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, that's,
What's the name of the book?
I'm sorry.
What's the name of the book he's saying?
Behold the Pale Horse.
Behold the Pale Horse.
Behold the Pale Horse. You have a question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, as you were receiving the unconditional love as you described it, were you able to accept it, or did it feel sometimes it was so powerful that it was suffocating?
It wasn't that I felt suffocated. I mean, I think that's kind of a negative connotation. It was just exhilarating.
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 But was it so exhilarating that like you almost needed air, or you felt like?
No, I wanted more. Who doesn't want more love like that? I wanted all of it. That was why I had this urge to merge. I'm like, yeah, give me more. And I think part of why people struggle in life, at least that's what my truth has been, and I had to learn all this, is that that's our point of origin. And innately inside, we know that's our source, and that's our nature, and that's our birthright, is that level of unconditional love. But when we come here and agree, by the way, we all agreed to be here, if you don't know that by now. We agreed to come here and experience certain things and have certain challenges in our life through purpose and spiritual growth. Once I figured out the purpose of my life was all about my spiritual growth and my higher self, I had a completely different perspective on how to live my life and the meaning of my life, and trying to understand certain things in my life, not just about my life, but about me and my own behavior and the things I've done in the past and who I was and who I am today. And I realized that the love that we are all entitled to, but are separate from right now, we can still connect to, but not like that. And we can, I guess we can, I shouldn't say that, because when I was in that light and love, I knew that absolutely anything is possible. There are no limitations for love. And that God's love has no limitation. So ergo, I don't doubt anybody's truth about anything, because that love is capable of manifesting and creating absolutely anything it wants. And for instance, if somebody would tell you there's no way you could ever make two hole-in-ones in a golf game back-to-back in the same round. That just happened a month ago. A guy in Ohio. Okay? Anything can happen. I used to love playing golf before my back got so bad, but I would have given my left arm to get one hole-in-one. He gets two in a row. I said, yeah, why not me? But yeah, it's just, I kind of lost track of my thought process there. Sorry, go ahead.
For those interested, there is a UFO club that meets about once a month, and it's presided over by ex-police officer. So, you know, you can check that out. But my question for you is, how has your near-death experience affected your family, and also have you done any regression analysis on your past lives?
I have not done that. I'm very interested in that, and I think I'm being led to do that because I just met someone at my chiropractor's office, and that's what she does. And so I'm very interested in that. And I also met a man recently named Don Cote, who is extremely well connected to the other side. He has constant data flooding into his consciousness about people and information. He has had to learn how to, he's my age, a little older maybe. And he's fascinating. So, you know, they say when you're ready, the teacher will come, and I think my teacher was showing up. Because that's kind of what I've been putting out there. I want to know more, I want to learn more, and I want to know what my unlimited potential is. Because I am made with that love and light. So I know my potential has no limit. I believe that. And because I live in a responsive universe and I understand that, I know that by asking the universe, what am I supposed to do next? And put the intention out there, it'll come back to me. And that's what's happening. So I'm excited about what I have to learn for how much life God lets me have still here to go. But I think it's going to be an amazing ride. You think that ride, landing on that runway, was a wild ride? This is the wild ride. Learning about the spiritual growth and spiritual potential, and learning how exciting my God really is to me. My God. You know, learn your own God. Go find a God of your own understanding.
I don't know if you know who David Wilcox is, but
Yes, I do.
he was here for a while. He's just written a section book called Synchronicity. That's all of what you're talking about, the past life, previous life, the DNA, and so forth. He also wrote the one just before that, was about a year ago. These two would widen your perspective in quantum physics and everything else. The other thing which I will just mention very briefly in the new book, which talks about both books, that the DNA actually captures photons.
Yes,
and they can actually.
I just read that about a week ago.
And they can make a DNA in a glass jar with nothing but water and sealed if they put another jar close to electricity.
I'm wondering why I got that little bit of synchronistic information.
I'll talk to you more like that.
I think I'm supposed to learn about that. I appreciate you bringing that up. Somebody else had their hand up here a second ago. Carrie, I'm sorry.
I'm just wondering if you can share how this experience changed your perspective with people who have passed. Like my dad recently passed, his lovely lady's husband.
Yeah.
How that has changed your perspective of how you grieve or see people
Oh, okay.
who die.
I understand. Before I answer that, though, I want to tell you guys about a book that I just finished reading called James Redfield. It's called The Celestine Vision. He wrote books called The Celestine Prophecy and The Celestine Prophecy, The 10th Insight. Those books were considered fiction, technically. This is not fiction. This is a nonfiction book that is the best description of some of the things I've been telling you about today I have ever read. It's written in a very simplistic, common sense way that anybody can understand. And it talks about relationships and how to pay attention to synchronicity and all of that stuff. It's all in here. So I highly recommend, it's called The Celestine Vision, Living a New Spiritual Awareness. And that's what I've learned how to do over the last 32 years, is my spiritual awareness has changed, and my belief system has changed. Because I'm an engineer, and things have happened to me directly, and I have to understand them. I don't have a choice. My dad, talking about people that passed, my father died about 8 years ago, and my wife and I, excuse me, went to see a spiritual medium named Maria Halverson, Halvorsen. So if you go to mariahalverson.com, you can read about her. She calls herself the reluctant medium because she was in nonprofit, corporate America level. I think she was the CEO or the COO or something like that, working in Boston, doing that kind of life. And all of a sudden, she started having these psychic and visual experiences of stuff happening, and she did not like it. You know, she didn't. And so her path led her to a spiritualist church like the one that's here, the Fellowship of Inner Life, but it's one in Swampscott, Massachusetts. And she met the people she needed to meet to teach her how to improve her skill sets. And so now she's a full-time medium. She walked away from the corporate world to do this because it's her spiritual path. And God wasn't letting her know, being answered. No, you're going to do this. Here's why. I'm going to flood this information in your head, and you're going to start seeing things, and you're not going to be able to ignore it. And yes, you're going to go walk this path. She's like, no, no, no. Yes, yes, yes. It was one of those things. She was chosen. And she finally said, okay. And she walked away from the corporate world making very good money, and now she's not doing any of that anymore. But we went to meet her and do a meeting with her. I met her at a Boston Ions meeting once. I did a class with her the following day, and then a month or two later, my wife and I went to one of her readings. And there was a group of 10 people in there. And my wife's grandmother came through, and she knew it was her grandmother. But my father came through. And my dad, I never knew what he believed growing up. He had a 7th grade or 8th grade education, put 6 kids through high school, God bless him. My mom died when I was in the 1st grade, and he was able to keep us all together as a family. Hard-working man, but I never once heard him talk about anything spiritual. He never went to church, nothing like that. Not a word. And so I didn't know what he believed when he passed away. He didn't even talk about it then. And I was there the day he died. So he comes through with this reading. And I knew it was my dad because she starts talking about my little red wagon when I was a kid and how I wouldn't share it with my brother. He's a year younger than me. His birthday is May the 5th, mine's May the 4th. We're a year and a day apart. And so we used to get the same toys and birthday together, all of that. And he had broken his, You know, I wasn't gonna let him play with mine because he's gonna break it. And he brought that up, and I hadn't thought about that red wagon. There's no way she could have known that. And she described it. No, he described it through her. You know, that the day I got a whipping because I wouldn't let my brother play with my wagon. How would she know that, right? So I knew my dad was alive. I knew it. He's talking to me through her, but I'm talking to my dad. And then she said, and your dad says he would have never believed in anything like this at all. I'm like, nope, not my dad. That's him. He didn't want to talk about God. He didn't want to, it just wasn't, I don't know what he believed, but he didn't express anything on it. He just went through life and experienced it. And he said through her, and he wasn't surprised that I had gained this much knowledge because I was always asking questions. As a little kid, I never stopped asking questions. I still don't stop asking questions. That's my nature. I'm an engineer, mind. That's how my mind works. I can't stop that. If I have a question, I've got to go figure it out and understand something. And I'm very determined when I decide I'm going to figure something out. I won't stop till I figure it out and get the answer. No matter how long it takes. And my dad taught me that. He said, son, you can do anything you want in life if you focus on it, put your mind to it, and never give up, ever. And so that's been my attitude through life. I believed it. He's right. I don't think he knew how spiritually more right he was at the time when he was telling me that I've understood today. Now, why intention and focus, never give up, matters as far as how the universe responds back to you and gives you what you're looking for. And, there's something else I was going to bring up a minute ago. I guess to sum it up in a short phrase, and this doesn't come from me. I mean, sometimes I'm now getting these little, as I meditate, I'm getting these statements dropped in my head, and I'm writing them down, putting the date that they happen. And hopefully they'll be part of my book as I come out, but whenever I get done with it. But I've learned through all of this process that rather than stumble through life dramatically reacting to it, I now choose to flow through the synchronicity of life, boldly creating it. There's a big difference in that. And so that's when I've changed from who I used to be to how I think now. And in the process, I also respect others, give unconditional love, and help others as much as I can. And you know, that's all that matters now to me. And learning. I'll never stop asking questions. And the other thing that Maria said that day was that my dad remembered the day and I asked him, why is the sky blue? And he didn't know. And I was a little kid. I'm like, you don't know. I thought all daddies knew everything. That was the first day I realized that my daddy didn't know everything. But since then, I learned why the sky's blue. And because I'm an engineer, I've got to go find out. And the sky's blue because the light gets bent through the nitrogen in the atmosphere. And that's why the sky's blue. So what my dad couldn't teach me, I go learn. Just keep asking questions, keep loving, and understand this. God is insanely in love with every one of you. Absolutely, insanely in love with you. You have no idea. A book called Journey of Souls, Destiny of Souls. I read both of them. I think the second way better. All these different case studies and people he's talked to. He's a doctor. Michael Newton. I think that's right, yeah. And he was telling a story about this one husband who was angry with his wife because he had passed away. And he's getting this information like you do, through one of his clients who can channel I can't remember the details about how she's channeling this guy. He's not happy, and he was angry with his wife because he had passed away a couple of years before her, and he loved her dearly, and he wanted to watch over her, and so he's waiting here in spirit form on earth, waiting for her. And then when she passed on, he flew right by him and went straight into the light and didn't even wait. He was not happy about that. Because all she could see was a light. It's like, yeah, I'm going there, you know? And so, don't be angry with me.
No, I didn't say angry, I said
Okay,
unhappy.
upset. That's fine.
You said you didn't know your father. I didn't know mine either. He was 48 years old when I was born.
Well, I knew my dad, I just didn't know what his belief system
Well,
was.
my dad was bad, but he was so far apart, and he died. And I had a friend of mine who was a psychic, which I had to loan some money to help her out, and she would give me readings, that little Anita. And one day she said, John, I'm telling you something, what, your father's here. I said, really? And she told me something. He wanted to tell you, he never got to tell you when he was here that he loved you. And that stuck with me. It still makes me, I have to cut that on me. But because we never had talked. We just never had.
He was from a different generation.
Oh, yeah.
They didn't express those kind of things.
Yeah.
And I think what's happening globally is there's this awakening happening around the world. And people are learning and spiritually growing much quicker at an earlier pace because the information is available, number one, easily available now on the internet. And there's probably a couple of generations of at least a couple, maybe three, of this really rapid growth of spiritual knowledge. And that information is being shared from people like me, for instance, with my daughter. I just showed a picture of my daughter, who she just graduated Phillips Exeter Academy in Exeter, New Hampshire. And I showed her pictures to people at lunch today. And one lady commented about how serene and grounded she was. I said, that's good. I'm glad you said that because I taught her everything I know. And we didn't get that. You know, our parents didn't know these things to teach us these things in the first place. But that's changing fast. And that is having a dramatic shift in the collective human consciousness. And I think something, I really do. I'm not sure what it's going to be, but I think something amazing is coming. And there's going to be a big shift. If there's going to reach this tipping point where you have the materialist scientific get what you can out of this life at other people's expense type thinking is going to go away. It's going to probably be a very traumatic global shift when it happens, because change never comes. I already have learned.
Another little piece of minutia, my mother was into all this kind of stuff, and somebody knocked on the door one day and says, I understand you the witch of Beach Street. She said, you got it all wrong. I'm a second-hand witch of Beach Street. Come on in. Second-hand witch of Beach Street.
So I think what's happening is this really rapid shift in the global human consciousness. I think it's being assisted, as Lloyd mentioned earlier. I think that the alien entities are here, and they are far beyond us in evolution. See, it's not just about the evolution it's through the experience process, because without that, there's life on it. To experience those things, so that they have meaning at a deep spiritual level, because otherwise you can have all the knowledge you want, and all knowledge is available on the other side. But without experience, it doesn't have the same impact or the same growth potential for spiritual growth.
Another piece of minutia that David had in his book, three scientists have discovered that all the dust that's in the universe is nothing but freeze-dried bacteria.
Freeze-dried bacteria?
That's what it is. And they discovered that's what it, and they say that these planets, although they're burning and so forth, there's bacteria that can live on the sun. Bacteria can live on the moon, there's bacteria that can live on the Mars. And when it gets out in the atmosphere, it's freeze-dried.
Excuse me. And that would make sense,
And
just considering how cold it is in space. But the other thing is, only 4.5% of the universe is physical mass. 4.5%.
Yeah.
They know the rest is out there. They've been able to detect it either directly or indirectly. The dark energy and dark matter, they know it's there, and it's inferred by its actions that they're seeing happen to the physical mass of space. And so about 72% of the universe is dark energy. The rest is dark matter, with 4.5% being physical matter. So how much are we unaware of that we can't see? You know, I saw a thing on television recently discussing the visible about light, frequency wave of light. And if you took light, all the entire frequency that we can detect with our equipment and technology we have today, who knows what we can't detect, okay? They just recently were able to detect for the first time neutrinos, trillions of them per second are flashing, going through your body, and you don't even know it. What are they doing? Part of the foundation of the universe, neutrinos are everywhere. We can't detect them until recently, and they only caught 4 or 5 of them. It's deep in the earth, in this dead still water detection system, $billion toy, it's just, we are so the light. If you were to take the visible, not visible, but the light energy wave that we can detect and put it between New York and Los Angeles, right? This is not only the visible light, but everything that we use our technology to see with. The visible light, the part that we see with our eyes, would take up 1/2 inch of that 3,000 miles. Mm-hmm. How much are we unaware of? Okay? That's my point when I talked earlier today, saying, having been in that light of God, there's nothing that's impossible. Nothing. I don't doubt anything. I'm an engineer. I want to see it, experience it, and understand it. It may be beyond my paradigm of thinking sometimes, but I have no doubt that whatever God chooses to go create or experience, he has to do is think about it. It's done. The power that I experience, the love controls, that God's love wields, the benevolent power, this is how I describe it. It's, I now believe that God, like I said earlier in today's meeting, God is an infinite being exploring an infinite number of universes. And so if there are an infinite number of universes, and each one was created with a Big Bang, I can't imagine what it would be like standing 1,000,000 miles from the surface of our sun, much less a Big Bang, much less a supernova, or nova, or a hypernova, or a black hole, or a Big Bang, which made all of those things. I can't imagine one Big Bang. But let's say you took an infinite number of universes, and they were all created with Big Bangs, and you took an infinite number of Big Bangs and made one great, big, massive Big Bang. That would be a dud, insignificant, stuttering firecracker going on the ground compared to what I experienced on the other side when I felt the love of God and its power it has. It is nothing. And that's an infinite number of Big Bangs going on. Was nothing. I was there. Direct experience of it. And so I don't doubt God can do absolutely anything. With that kind of power at his disposal, exactly. It's all possible.
Does the Big Bang Theory do away with the universal intelligence?
I have no idea. I haven't thought about that. But why would it? I mean,
And intelligence is not here, so
God exists outside of time and space, okay? We live in a four-dimensional world. You know, three dimensions that we know of, up, down, left, right, back, forward, and then time, space-time. And Einstein's equation proved all that. When I was in the light, I knew I was outside of space-time. It has a completely different feel. That dimension is a different dimension. It has no way it feels like this. When I was talking about that sense of holiness, that I felt the holiness, it was all about the feelings and the energy, which is what I wanted to touch base on today, to discuss some of these things in the workshop, is to discuss literally about that. It's those feelings of energetic waves of the essences of joy, of bliss, of ecstasy, of love, of goodness, peace, holiness. All of that was, each and every one of them and much more was there. Each and every one of them had their own form of power and sense of experience through emotional, I don't even know how to explain this. Just there are no words to describe what I want to tell you. That's why I wish earlier I could just touch somebody and have it. Here's what I wish I could do. I really wish I could do this. Touch one person and let them experience that split. I don't know if I was there for a split second or for an eternity. Both, when there's no space-time and time doesn't matter, you're outside of time. There's only the eternal now, okay? It's the eternal now, and so time doesn't matter. It is non-existent there. And I can't explain that because I live in a linear world, speaking in a linear fashion, trying to describe something that's non-linear. You just can't do that. And
So we have a group here called the First Friday Prayer Group. And the first time I went to it was June a year ago. And they put you on a table and do a healing on you, and they set you down and they fold your arm, and the lady stood behind me, put her arm. That's the most love I've ever felt from no other human being in my whole life.
it's tip of the iceberg, my friend.
You know? I said,
That's the very tiny tip at the top of the one snowflake on top of a gigantic Antarctic ice sheet. I don't know what they are or what their problem is to it, and they've lost that. You know, when I was in that light and I came back from it, I lost the.
In terms of losing,
Right.
maybe semantics. And B, my question would be, what happened?
What do you mean?
Where's it? Where did it go? Where's
It's still
it
there. It's all around us. Because everything is created. Remember, the only way we can, if we were constantly connected to the other side in that manner that I was, you can't be in both worlds at the same time.
I mean, in a physical
It's-
body? Or?
You cannot be in a physical body
Okay.
and have your consciousness partially in the spirit world experiencing that and function here. It cannot be done. It's too overwhelming. It just can't be done. I don't know how it can be done.
Well, what do you
And
think?
so-
I have a question about that too.
Okay, but let me get to the point. So, that veil that they speak of,
Right.
the veil of forgetfulness and that kind of thing, I think that is literally the density of this physical world and our brain slowing everything down and dumbing down our awareness level so that we can exist in this world and be able to have experience, physical experience. Because remember I said, and emotional experience, and relationship experience, all experience. And remember I said earlier, spiritual growth and spiritual knowledge and spiritual awareness on the other side doesn't have this same meaning without physical experience. And so you do, there's a higher purpose to all this. And I'm not aware of it completely on this side, but I know it exists because I was there. And I cannot ignore that. I mean, I had direct experience. I don't want that to sound egotistical or arrogant in any way, because what I experienced is available to everybody. I really believe that. But we have to do the work, and we have to ask, and we have to seek. And I think the day that I said that simple prayer of deep gratitude, I opened a door with that prayer after nearly dying 2 days before. Somehow that